Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for joining us all the way through this year. I can't believe we're already at the end of 2025. That's crazy. And I'm super excited to bring my guest to you guys today. So Kellie, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Yes. I'm so excited. Okay, we got some really cool stuff. I am super excited about a freebie she's going to talk about at the very end. So make sure that you guys stay so you can hear all of the amazing things. And actually, you know what? I think I'm really even more excited to have the conversation around pivots, right? I know that you kind of specialize in kind of burnout and this reinvention and kind of starting fresh, no matter your age, right? Which I am a huge fan of. And I think this is a perfect topic too, to really have toward the end of the year for everybody that, you know, is already planning for 2026. So thank you so much. I am super excited to dive into this today. Please do us all a favor then and tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Yes, thank you. Well, my name is Kellie Grutko, and I am the founder and what I like to call Chief Pivot Officer for my company called Purposeful Pivot. So it makes sense. And we are a women's one-on-one life coaching business. We do coaching, we do retreats, we do group coaching, and a bunch of workshops. So everything surrounding women making transitions in life, we try to support them and help them get through these kinds of things faster than our own experience. And so just about me, originally I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania, and currently I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's just outside of Charlotte, where it's a little bit warmer, or a lot warmer. And so I spent my whole career in marketing, and I was at, very large corporations. And just kind of after so many years of doing the same thing at very big companies, I just kind of got burnt out. And so, and I know we'll go into it, but that was what prompted me to kind of leave and start Purposeful Pivot, because I got burnt out, struggled with the transition, and so created this company so I could help other people so they don't struggle. So just top of the line, a little bit about me.
I love it. I think it's wonderful. And I love Charleston. I love that you're over there. So it's on my place to visit. I've been to like Asheville and all the other places around, and I got to make it over there. So
Oh, nice.
but I want to, I'm actually really curious because, I feel like burnout has become a little bit of a buzzword in the industries and what's going on. What does burnout mean to you?
Yeah, for me, it was, I loved my one company. I was there almost 20 years, and I loved the company. I loved all the people I worked with. I had the dream job. From the outside looking in, people are like, she's got the dream job. Like, my office was up in Manhattan. I had, up in this high rise. I had this all great responsibility. And then to me, burnout was just kind of, you get that pit in your stomach on Sundays because then you got to go to work on Monday. And the projects that used to be fun weren't really fun anymore. And, you'd always kind of raise your hand for new things and to get involved. And I wasn't raising my hand. So it was just little things at first. And, then you start to kind of tamp it down and just ignore it. You're like, oh, I need a vacation or whatever. And then
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of keeps at you for years. Like it just kept at me for a couple years. And so finally you have to kind of admit, you know what, maybe this is telling me I'm burnt out and need to try something new. Because you get to a point maybe where you just don't grow anymore. And then
Mm.
it becomes stale. So yeah.
I
So,
love that. And I love that you brought it back to growth because I think that's a big thing. And I also believe that, especially like as women, don't get me wrong, guys, I know you guys do this too, but
yeah.
we are, I feel like, especially once we're in like a bigger corporate space, we're like always pushing to climb the ladder, to climb the ladder, to climb the ladder, looking for like that next thing, right? Like how do we get the different promotion? How do we get to be above more things, which ends up
Yeah.
being more responsibility? And I think that it's very important for us to all remember what it is that we enjoy doing, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be all the titles. I think that there is a space in what you do where there's a level of enjoyment as well, instead of absolute, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I gotta go in this week for 40 hours. Yay.
Right.
Like that's, I think, where people start getting into like, oh, I hate Mondays. Like, I love
Yeah.
Mondays. I think it's a new
Yeah.
beginning. But I definitely think that not only is it a perspective shift, but it's also like understanding you and what motivates you, right? Do you feel like that's
Right.
kind of a part of what made your decision as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. Men go through this, obviously, probably just as much, but I just happen to know the female brain a little bit more and been around many females. So that's why I concentrate there, but I'm happy to help men too. But yeah, I think, I go out and I speak often as well. And I have one talk that I like to give that's called Rewriting Your GPS and No More Default
Ooh.
Destinations, because it is that default, right? It's like you go to college, you graduate, you get your first job, and then you go for promotion to promotion and you work your way up. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because you think that's what you're supposed to do. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I worked by, I have a whole list of titles that I had, that I just kept working my way up. And I finally you get to the top and then you're like, you know what? All right, now I don't have a goal. Like I did it. What do I do now? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And that growth part of it is, so important that I just, you get to that point where you're like, wow, I think I need to try something new, because it does just kind of get to that point where you followed everybody else's expectations of you. And then you're like, well, maybe I need to come up with what brings me joy, like you said, and what makes me excited to go to work on a Monday. So yeah, that's absolutely right.
So leaning into that then, and what kind of brings you joy, what was kind of the pivoting point in those thoughts? I know when you said you started realizing that maybe this wasn't necessarily that you needed a vacation or anything like that. What kind of led you into thinking like starting my own company is kind of like the direction that I want to go?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it kind of came by random accident. I get well, not accident, but so I left this one job that I was at for years, and I thought, maybe I just kind of want to climb down the ladder a little bit. So it's easier, and I don't have as much responsibility, and maybe that's what I want to do. And I tried that. Well, that doesn't work for anybody that's tried that. It's very hard to go back, because then it's then you're like, well, I should be doing some of those other things and not this. And then it starts to mess with your mind. So I took another job just thinking, all right, maybe I just need to change industries. Maybe that'll get me going.
Mm.
And it was a different function. I wasn't doing straight marketing. I was training marketing folks
Oh,
on
okay.
proper way of doing. So I'm like, all right, it's training. I'm learning. That's something different. So I did that a couple of years, and which was great, and another good company. But again, it just wasn't fulfilling. So I left there, and then I didn't know what to do, and so I just got on that hamster wheel again and started applying to more marketing jobs. And I thought, okay, I have a couple target industries. Maybe if I get into those, that'll do it.
Mm.
And so you keep applying and applying, and nothing was happening. Nothing was appealing. And like a year goes by, and I'm still out. I'm like, finally, I just had to admit, I really just don't want to go back to corporate, and I really don't want to do marketing. I've been doing it for 30 years. It was great. I just don't want to do it anymore. So the way I got to where I am now was I was talking to a friend, and which I think is critical. I think you need to talk things through. So I was talking to her about an old dream I had, which was to host my own TV show. And
Ooh.
years ago, I know this is a funny story. So years ago, I actually hired a production company. I traded out some time at a big resort, and I had and I wrote this whole script and this whole pitch for, producers and whomever. And I had them follow me around all day, and I created kind of a sample episode of what my show is going to be all about. And it was all about helping, women travel on their vacation days, but be active. So when you come back from vacation, you don't feel like, you just laid around and did nothing. You feel better when you come
Mm,
back. So when I was talking to my friend, I thought, well, if I took the TV part out of it, I like to help women. I want to make an impact on their lives. I like to travel. Maybe I'll host retreats, and that'll be my new role. And so the marketer that I am started doing market research and focus groups. And, I got a bunch of women together and started asking about retreats. And then I remember one woman said to me, yeah, retreats are great, but then you leave and you go back to everyday life. You forget what you learned and you just go back to
mm,
normal. So then I thought, well, maybe I can coach these women after the retreat so they keep the momentum going and change their lives. And then I just flip flopped it and said, why don't I coach first, find out what's important to women, and then create retreats around that. So, long story, that's how I kind of got there. It was through an old dream. And it was allowing myself to kind of take off the marketing blinders, if you will, and open
mhm.
myself up to totally different thoughts and brainstorming. So
Isn't
that's
it
where it came from.
interesting how when we when we're in something we know we're really good at, like it's so easy for us to go back to that and be like, yeah, but that I can do this. And this is like it's so easy to sit in that space
Yeah.
and still miss the mark on what we feel like is fulfilling. Because I know I've done that as well, working in the medical field for over 10 years. It was, I want to help people, I want to do this, and then it was like but this is the same thing and it's very mundane and I feel like I'm kind of strapped to what I'm actually able to do for people. I don't know.
Yeah.
I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I know you take the, your brain always tends to go to what's safe and easy.
Yep.
I've been reading a lot of neuroscience books lately.
Oh,
You can tell.
girl, we can go down
Um,
the rabbit hole.
I know it's like, oh my gosh, it's sucking me in. It's fascinating. But yeah, they always say the brain tries to keep you safe. And so
Yeah.
that's why I think a lot of people just stay in the same roles because it's safe. You don't have to learn something totally new.
Hmm.
And you're getting a paycheck. And so it's very safe. And so to go out and do something new is, fearful. Many people are afraid to take that jump. So I get it.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
scary.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
neuroscience to me, I think and that's one of the things that really helped me deal with my domestic abuse after I got out of it. And it was really learning just how the brain operates. So heads up to everybody, if you want to go down a rabbit hole, go find you some stuff about neuroscience. There is an amazing doctor. Her
Mhm.
name is Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor. She's been in neuroscience for 30 years. She's been in that space, and she actually had a stroke at the age of 37 and lost half of the
Wow.
use of her brain. And so she
Yeah.
talks about whole brain living. Oh, it is.
Oh
Anyway,
boy.
phenomenal person to listen to. Very animated, a lot of fun. She really is great about breaking it down. But you're right. It really is interesting how our brains are made to keep us safe, right? Like that is what they are programmed to do. They don't understand right and wrong. They don't understand good and bad. That's what concepts that we have put on everything and boxed everything in. The brain is just like, nope, this is what we know. This is what we want to do. This is the
Yeah.
path we want to continue on. And when you stray, it's like, oh, no. It tries to,
What are you doing?
right, it tries to bring you back. So, okay, now, so give me the picture then. So we're realizing like, okay, I'm really starting to feel like I understand what I want. I know this passion that's kind of bubbling up in the
Mhm.
direction that I want to go. Um, how do you start that, right? Because some people are running lives and are, running children and things like that. And not everybody is meant to be entrepreneurial either, right?
Right.
Some people
Right.
are okay with where they are at in regards to the money coming in that's a little bit more even.
Yeah.
I get that. And they're still not finding the fulfillment in what it is that they're doing. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with those?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard and it's not just entrepreneurship, like you said. I mean, I've coached women that are retired and they just
Mm,
want to make sure they don't become invisible. And So they start to do everything, get involved, and then they get themselves overwhelmed. And so we need to kind of narrow down what's driving your passion. What do you want to do? So, it is hard. And you really, like, for me, it was identity. Like I had a big issue with losing my identity when I left corporate because I was so
Mm,
tied to my title. So I get a lot of women might not leave because their identity is, I think, to get out of it, you really do have to kind of think through other things that bring you joy. You need to try different things. You can still try different things while you're working, volunteer, or, just find things on social media that interest you and follow influencers
hmm
that are doing something you think would be cool. And you can do it slowly. And then I think once you find that thing, it's almost like you almost can manifest it if you just position yourself as that's who I am. Like your brain, I think back to the brain, is kind of predictive. It predicts your future based on your what it knows from the past. But if you just keep telling yourself that, yeah, I'm this, like right now, I'm a coach, and I would tell myself I am a coach. So then I slowly started to manifest, well, yeah, I am. And so you have to give yourself permission to kind of try things and give yourself time to find what it is that lights you up,
mm.
because it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that, you go back to identity. And I think that this is something that women deal with a lot more than men. I'm sure that there are men in this space as well, but we as women, especially when we have families and we have kids and we have all these other things to do, we really do forget who we are as an individual. And it's really funny. I saw a clip on Instagram a couple of days ago, and it was a lady that was talking about this specific thing. And she asked the woman, "Who are you?" And she said, "Well, I'm a mother." And she said, "Great, that's for someone else." And she was like, "And I do this." She was like, "Great, that's for someone else. Who are you to
Yep.
you?" And I thought, oh my gosh, like if you think about it, anytime that we are introducing ourselves or we talk about who we are, like, oh, I'm a mom of two kids and I do this and I like, it's always for someone else. I don't think
Right.
that we focus enough on who we are as an individual, right?
Yeah.
I am someone who absolutely loves music. I am someone that loves to be outdoors, and it was a really interesting concept and just such a simple question that it's
Yeah.
like you are used to answering it, but the way that she kept coming back and going, okay, well, that's for someone else. Okay, that's for someone else. It was like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, think of how many times that we do that when we are identifying who we are, but we're really kind of explaining our roles, right? Whether it's paid or unpaid, we're explaining the roles. We're not explaining us as an individual.
That's exactly right. And it that's hard to get out of. I mean, I remember being at parties after I left my job and I didn't have one. And, someone would ask, what do you do? Or, and I didn't have an answer. And it was the most awkward, it's just the most awkward feeling. You just don't know how to answer that. And so I
Yeah.
can totally empathize with people that go through that. A lot of people are in between jobs now. And it's just uncomfortable. So I get that. So a lot of like what I coach people on is really trying to get through that identity crisis, because you do tie yourself to a role or a title, and you're so much more than that. And so,
hmm
and I think too, when people are making a transition, if they've been doing the same thing for years, like for me it was marketing, but others have other professions, or they've been head of household for years and now their kids have graduated and gone off, it becomes like hard to find who you are next. And so you really do need to think through kind of what's important to you and what are your values, and start to base it on that. So,
Ooh, values. Okay, so
yeah.
let's pivot into that one because I think that again, this is another fantastic topic of conversation that really boils down to understanding your identity as well is
Mhm.
understanding your core values. So I know that, if you ask someone what are your values, right? We can go through a list of all kinds of things that
Yeah.
we can name off, and a lot of those end up becoming more boundaries, I feel like, than an actual core value. So if we're having a conversation with someone who, let's say, is trying to really kind of figure out who they are, how do you identify what some of those values are that can then drive what it is that you want to do next in life?
Yeah, I even have just like worksheets just for values, like listing them all out and have you look through them and see which ones. Because sometimes people are like, well, what's exactly a value or what does this mean? They get confused on what that is. But yeah, I have people go through it and just think, well, what's important to you? And then I say, all right, take your job out of your picture, take money and finances out of the picture, take your family and friends. It's just you. You're starting from scratch, no boundaries. What's important? What would you want to do? And you really kind of have to go back to the basics to find, what's important to you because you've been absorbing everything, your whole life, all these experiences, what's important to other people, where you fit in. And it's hard to just turn all that off and just think about yourself because
Yeah.
and I think a lot of women have trouble doing that too. But you do have to kind of sit with that and think, if there was nobody else in my life and it was just me, no one was dependent on me, what would I do? And start there.
Mm.
And you have to think big. You can't just think, oh, maybe I would take this step. It's got to be huge. And then you pare it down to reality, right? You start really big and then you bring it down to kind of what makes sense. So,
Yeah, and I think that that's a really interesting point as well when we talk about, dreaming. A lot of people dream about like their next vacation or what they're going to do in the next couple of years. And I do think that it's important to have this huge outlying, not necessarily goal, but just an idea, a feeling of what you want, whether it's an accomplishment or where you want to be or things like that. I personally believe that when we take the time to dream or daydream, just outside of the boundaries of, what society tells us is
yeah,
possible, dependent on where we are at and what we are doing. I think that you also open up your eyes to additional possibilities, right? Especially if you're doing this on a regular basis. Like it's one thing to do it like once a year, right? Oh, I put my vision board up and then I don't think about it for the rest of the year. Like that's not helpful. It's
yeah,
great in the moment and if you ever talk to people that do vision boards and follow things like that, they put it in a space where they are constantly looking at it. And then they're also making time to go back over those
yeah,
visions and those dreams because it is something that they want. And I think that that is super important. I think that we as adults are not taught that anymore, right? Like we
right,
dreamed and we thought big when we were kids, and then we get to like a
right.
certain stage and everybody's like, well, that's stupid, don't do that anymore. And we lose that. And I have to say that, being on that side of the fence where I was just very practical, very logical, very this is what it is day by day, to now being able to expand into the what ifs, like it
Yeah,
is so much more expansive and enlightening and joyful just to think. It doesn't have to happen, right? But I think
right.
it's important to have that aspect in what you do because to be honest, maybe this is just me, I think that being childlike and having some of those features and stuff like that is extremely important to us as adults. But again, we're told by society that's not what you do anymore because you're not a child. And because of that, we find ourselves in these boxes and then we don't know how to get out of them.
Yeah, yeah. You're yeah, right on. And I think, I think too that the like the vision boarding thing, it's so funny that you bring that up because I just did like I don't even like the name vision board. I just did a workshop and it's called my clarity canvas. And
Ooh.
I know. And I was going when I was doing the workshop, I went through all the science of why they work. And we created them digitally online and so that you can make it your screensaver on your computer and then on your phone. So that every day, if you were on your phone, which you know you are, or on your computer, you were going to see it. And, you really can manifest things to happen. And I know it's probably easier said than done. Some people are probably sitting there thinking, well, I have like major responsibilities. I can't just dream and go do things. And I totally get that. It's something that like I said before, you have to do probably slowly. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can prepare,
Hmm.
for the future so that you do have goals down the road. So when you are ready to make a move, you've kind of done the hard work already. You've thought it through and you're ready to go. So I don't want anyone to think by any means that it's something that you just, manifest and it happens tomorrow because it does take time and work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also depends on, right, like you were just saying, where you're at in your life at that moment. And I think that that's why it's really important to um, get involved in additional things, like you said, maybe
Yeah.
volunteering or doing things like that. What you're doing is you're creating a space to learn something different without the judgment and fear of, oh my God, if I screw this up, I lose my job, I lose my house, like all the things. And you give yourself the space to explore
Hmm.
in all those other things. And again, I get it. I've got two kids, so like I know there's not a lot of time. And it is very important to make sure that we make time for ourselves. My boys are 21 and 17. So they're pretty self-reliant, although mom still gets the phone calls of like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. Oh, my car is doing the, like it's always going to be something is
Hmm.
kind of how I see it. And so waiting for the perfect moment or okay, once my kids grow up, I can do this, or once this happens and they move out, I can do this. Like there is always going to be something that happens and you can never predict the future, right? And so I think that, and this is something that funny enough, my husband and I were just having a conversation is I have had to learn to work on putting myself first. And he's like, "Well, what does that mean?" And I'm like, go taking a shower without being interrupted and making that a thing, getting up early in the morning before everybody because I want to meditate and I want to journal and things like that, things that bring me joy." And he's like, "How is that putting you first?" And I'm like, "Because it's not something that I think to do. My first thought, especially as a mom, is like, okay, does everybody have food? Do we have water? Have the dogs been taken out? Did
Right.
I order groceries for this week?" Like all these other things, all these other checklist items become the first and you end up putting yourself last. And so it's really interesting, especially when you talk to guys. No offense, guys. But just like how they're like, well, I wanted to go golf, so I made time on the weekend to go golf. And
Yeah.
a lot of us women are like, well, I would love to go do X, Y, and Z, but there was this, and this that need to be done, and I felt like I needed to do that before I could do this for me. Heads up, you guys, I've left dishes in the sink overnight. It's gonna be okay. And that used to be something that used to drive me crazy. But I've learned like it's okay. I can clean those up
Yep.
tomorrow. I can do that in the morning. I can do it on my lunch break. Nobody's gonna die. The roaches are not gonna show up in 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that and I'm curious to know your thoughts. Like, do you feel like we say we're putting ourselves first, but yet we're still putting the whole checklist before we're actually putting ourselves first?
Yeah, I think that's hard. I think sometimes it just doesn't come naturally to us for whatever reason. It's just not natural. Um, but I'm glad you put your husband in this too, because I think it's a support system. You have to have a
Yeah.
good support system no matter where you are in life, to be able to make some of these decisions and choices if you are going to pivot. So that's why I think a good community of people is important too, whether it's just friends or networking groups or colleagues, whoever. I think you need to have a good support system to do all this because, yeah, sometimes you need people to push you to put yourself first, right? Because something you
Oh,
forget. So
absolutely.
maybe a friend is like, "Well, what'd you do today for yourself?" It can be something that simple. But yeah, sometimes you need the little bit of a push to put yourself first. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's another really great thing to bring up as well is being aware of who you surround yourself with, when it comes to being in a space of wanting to grow. We all hear the saying that you're most like the five people that you surround yourself with. And I have to say that I was like, no, I'm not. For like the longest time. However, it doesn't mean that you are identical to that person, but what ends up happening is your habits or their habits kind of rub off on you because
Mhm.
ultimately we are built to be communal creatures. And so,
Right.
because we are built to be these communal creatures, we are looking to be similar so that we will fit in. And because of that, it means that I think, almost subconsciously do things to
Mhm.
fit in or to be similar, even if it's something that we don't really want to do or just don't think about this is what's going to get me to the next space. And I thought that that was really interesting when I really took a hard look at like, what are the things that I really don't enjoy about myself? What are the things that I really want to create a shift or a change in? And then out of those things, what are my friends doing? Right?
Mhm.
That are similar to that. And it was really interesting. I was like, oh wow. Like It's very subtle, but it's so impactful to understand what you're doing, especially when it comes to making pivots, like what you're saying. Sometimes our family isn't always the best to go to. And it's not because they want to be doubtful of you, but they see you in a specific light. They've seen you in that specific light, and that's where they hold you is in that specific light, right? And so I think that you're totally correct. Like having a community and people that you surround yourself with that also want to build you up and see you grow or talking about similar things is so important when it comes to making those pivots.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, people put you in a role. They've seen you that way forever, so they just put you in that space, and you kind of just go along with it because that's how they see you. So you see yourself that way too. And I know for me, when I left my role and became a coach, I was very fearful of what people were going to think of me because they had me,
Mm,
pegged as this marketing executive at a very large corporation. And now I'm a coach, a completely different, career path. And so I was fearful of what I mean, I literally like delayed starting my business like a couple months because I was afraid to put myself out there. So it's a hard thing to do that too, to kind of take yourself out of the role that everybody expects you to do. And at one point, you got to kind of turn that off and say, what do I want to do? Not what other people think I should do.
yeah.
So there's hard choices in making a pivot. There's really, there's hard choices, but when you do make it and you've thought it through and it's something that, like you said, brings you joy, you're so much better on the other side.
Mm.
So I know it's kind of a hard thing to get through, but it usually everyone I've talked to always is happier on the other side once they've made their pivot, which is good. Knock on wood. Knock on wood. Everybody's been pleased.
I love that, Kelly. So let's say that we have some people that are listening that are like, I've really thought about this, and I've tried, and I feel like I keep failing at even getting in that space. I feel like my mind is getting in my way. What would be some of the things that you would tell people or that could help people that are kind of in this in-between space?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that just get stuck. And I'm working with a couple people right now that just different scenarios, but they've been doing the same thing for a long time. And they just can't think of themselves in any other way. I mean, I was talking to
Mm,
one person and she'd been at the same company for 27 years. And every question I asked her, she answered it from the perspective of being at that company. And it wasn't until I said, all right, pretend you don't work there. You've never heard of this company before. Now answer the same question. And like a light bulb went off. She's like, oh my God, I never thought to answer it just for myself and not from my company perspective.
oh,
So it was like,
wow.
it was like, wow. Like I watched her literally light up because something went off in her brain. She's like, wow, I just never thought to do that. So I think it is helpful to have someone to talk to, whether it's a coach or a friend or a spouse. I think that's really a really big step is to talk through what you're feeling, what you're fearful of, what might help get you unstuck. If maybe somebody else could pick up the slack on something so that you can give time and dedicate to other things that you want to try. I think that's like the mindset part is the biggest part. It's, even me, I have a framework I take clients through, and the very first part of my framework is preparing your mindset because it all starts there. You can't do it without
Mm,
being ready. So that takes the work, and it just takes a lot of, internal being honest with yourself, some internal perspectives. Yeah.
yeah. Ooh, okay. Mindset and honesty. Ooh, hold on. Okay. I want to unpack this really quick because I think that when we think of, if we're going back to kind of neuroscience and things like that, what you say and what you say to yourself really matters.
Mhm.
And when you say you're going to do something for yourself and then you don't, you really are teaching yourself not to trust yourself.
Yeah.
So, let me have done a lot of work in that area. So when we start with, being honest, what do you feel like are some of the most important things that we need to be honest? Obviously, we need to be honest with ourselves on everything, but what are some of the things that you think like you really need to sit down and have a conversation with yourself and be 100% totally honest?
Yeah. Well, I like to do an exercise called the Wheel of Life. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it breaks your life out into 8 categories. And
Ooh.
you can change it up. You can add more, take some out, but it's things like relationship, career, home environment, health. So it breaks up your life into just different categories. And then
Okay.
you rate your satisfaction or your happiness in those categories. And you have to sit
Oh,
down and really be honest. What if, maybe you're not as healthy as you'd like to be, and or maybe you break out the health category to physical health, mental health. However you want to do it, you can do it. But it's being really honest with maybe what's happening in your life in those areas. And then you look at the areas that maybe you're just not as satisfied, and you can do better. And maybe you start there and think, if I brought these areas up where I was much more satisfied and more happy, would that make my life more joyful? And do I need to pay attention to those? So I like to start there because it's your whole life we're looking at. Yeah, maybe you're making a career pivot or a pivot from just one random thing to another, but it really does entail all areas of your life because one pivot affects another.
yeah, very
So
true.
yeah, so I like to start there is what I like to do. And again, you do it yourself, you're brutally honest, and then maybe you want to talk it through with somebody that can give you some other outside objective, observations too that you might not have thought
Yeah.
about. So
Definitely. Now, and you keep talking about, talking this out loud and talking to other
yeah.
people. How important do you think that it is versus just like having the conversation with yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to do both. You can, like you said, you can journal, you can meditate, you can have these conversations with yourself. But I think oftentimes it doesn't feel real unless you say it.
Mm,
And, and then the more you say something, the more real it sounds, it becomes, and then it becomes a possibility, and then the possibility becomes a goal, and then you start to make it happen. So I think it starts inside and internally, but I think it always helps to talk with somebody about it because, like I said, once you've said it, it becomes real.
definitely. And I think that there's a space of the brain that also makes a connection, right? When we're like visibly auditorily speaking it out loud. I don't know where my brain went. Speaking it out loud, but then again, you're hearing it in a very different light. It's very different than if you say it in your head. It's almost like when you say it in your head, it's a secret. Do you feel like
Yeah.
that? I feel like
Or you don't
sometimes.
act upon it because you're not accountable, right? You didn't admit
Yeah.
to it. So, oops, if I don't do it, nobody's going to know. Yeah.
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 It is really
True,
interesting.
true.
It's like your own secret little space. And it's like, you're right. It's nobody knows. And I think that speaking out loud or writing it down really kind of like brings it to the forefront. When I started going through my healing journey, journaling became a really big thing for me for a while. And I always hated journaling because my thought process was, oh, great. So, dear diary, this is what I did today and this is how I felt. But what I learned was journaling does not have to be anything that is structured. And so what I did was I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it the way that I feel called to do it. And I would just write the most random things down. I mean, like, I go back and look at some of my journal entries and I'm like, I can't even read what I wrote. But like, I would just be like, this is effing stupid. Why am I even doing like just all these stupid things? But in doing that and not giving yourself the structure and not, like punctuation and, answering questions, just like releasing, it was really interesting some of the things that came up. And the more that I did that, I was like, oh.
Hmm.
That's what's going on. Okay. So I agree with you. I think that, obviously it depends on every person and how you deal with things and work through things and stuff like that. But I know that for me, talking things out is a huge thing, which bless my poor husband, because he's like, I would prefer to deal with it a little bit more internally. And I'm like, I want to talk for 3 hours. Um, so, but
Yeah.
I think understanding how you work through things is super important as well. And like you said, it ends up affecting every area of your life. And the more that I started talking out loud about one thing, the more that I was like, oh, well, then maybe I should talk a little bit more about this. And then that led to, okay, well, maybe I should start asking my kids more questions to understand what their life is like and understanding really where they're coming from. And so it kind of started to create this like open possibility space of curiosity,
Hmm.
where you want to learn more and you want to ask the questions and you're like, I don't want my brain to fill in the blank. And I think that that's probably for me, like that's one of the funnest things. I probably drive some people absolutely crazy. with it. But I think that again, like we talked about in the very beginning, you're shifting the mindset, you're shifting the way that you think about things, the way that you believe in stuff, and that in itself, right, is what leads us into a space of growth or
Yeah.
openness.
Right. And I love that you use the word curiosity because I think that, you put less pressure on yourself. Oh, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. No, why don't you just get curious about a couple different things? That's it. Just get curious and start to learn. And
Oh
that,
yeah.
and then you just don't know what comes of that. So I love that you use that word because it's so important. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that because I come from a very structural understanding, like I grew up with very routine. I grew up with right like X, Y, Z, fill in the spaces kind of a thing. But what I found was, if you when you learn to ebb and flow between the space of logic and structure to, oh, this is kind of neat. What's going to happen? You really do kind of crisscross those wires and allow yourself to really kind of see things very differently. And I also think that it's also been very helpful to retrain the brain and how the brain sees things, right? Because we internally are very judgy, both to ourselves and to the outside world. And most of the time, we're projecting our own judgments onto others, something that I learned, which was very interesting. And we are fantastic at filling in the blank, right? You hear 2.5 seconds of a conversation, you've already created your entire story. And coming from an abusive situation, I knew that I needed to shift the way that my brain saw things and created the stories so that I didn't just completely push everyone away from me because I didn't know how to deal with my own stuff. And so that's kind of what I started with was what questions can I ask to get a bigger picture? And then it just became such a habit. Now it's like instead of me creating the story or finishing it, I find myself saying, okay, but can you explain that a little bit more? I heard you say this, but I feel like there's this piece missing. Can you fill that in for me? And I think that for me, that's been one of the really cool things because now you're actively listening. You're not just hearing what somebody says, you're actively listening and you're taking the information in. And I really think that that's where we get to shift not only ourselves, but our perception and how we see things moving into the future, which again, like we talked about, opens up those opportunities, it opens up the boundaries, it opens up, the manifestation space of it, where you have the ability to see past the wall that we've built.
Right, right. And I love that. Like it all just sounds, I'm sure people think, oh, this just sounds scary and crazy, but it really is exciting just listening to you talk and all the possibilities. I mean, it really is an exciting time and I work with a lot of, kind of midlife women because I feel like a lot of, a certain age group, you kind of worked your whole career and you've done it for 30 years or, you've done had a different profession or you're a teacher or you're a homemaker, whatever your situation. But I feel like you've earned the right now after all these years and all these experiences to choose what to do next. And so I like
Mm,
to always think of this in a very positive manner that yes, it can be scary. Yes, you got to listen, you got to learn, you got to, try new things. But at the end of the day, you're just making a choice for yourself and you've earned the right to do that. And so I just want people, when they listen to this, to realize that, they've earned the right to make these choices and they should be excited to do whatever it is they want to do in their next stage of life. So,
absolutely. And I think that like we talked about earlier, right? You can start small. That
yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
cool part. And I know that we talked about this a little bit in the beginning. I also know that you have a a lovely little freebie on this as
Ah,
well. So tell everyone in regards to like how do you see starting small? What does that mean for you? And how does that kind of translate into how you help other people in your space as well?
yeah, yeah. My freebie that I want to offer people is just it's a simple worksheet called Small Wins. Because I feel like, we look at the negative and oftentimes you forget to look at the very small daily wins that you have. And if you could do that and you start to do more and more and you recognize them, and maybe at the end of the day, if you're a journaler, every night you write down what was one small win and what's one thing I'm gonna, let go of tonight. And, do that routinely and see how you start to pack up all these wins and it gives you momentum to keep going. So, yeah, so I like to, talk to my clients I try to be I'm a very positive person by nature. And so, but yet I understand struggles too. So, I like to come into a situation where hopefully I can understand and be empathetic to maybe what you've been through, but I'm positive and I have confidence that you can come out and do what you want to do on the other side. So it's always a two-way conversation, very confidential, like safe space. And a lot of things come out, which is nice. And maybe you're not comfortable talking to a friend or a spouse about some things, and you just need an open space where there's no judgment and you can talk things through. And sometimes that does allow you to be a little freer in your brain to come up with different ideas. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So celebrate the small wins because they're there. I guarantee it.
Oh, 100%. I think that that was one of the biggest things that I had to learn because we are so taught to look for the big achievement. And when you think about it, I mean, for any achievement that you've done, whether it's I just ran my first 5K or I just got that promotion, you still did all of these small little things that built up to get you to that bigger win. But we have been so focused on, only celebrating this huge thing. And, for a lot of people, they don't have those big wins. Maybe they're in a space where they're struggling in their life. And so those very small things like getting out of bed in the morning and making your bed, that's a huge win for people that are starting over in a space or learning how to redo things in their life. And I think that along with gratitude creates a much easier way to see the positivity since our brains are wired to see the negative by like what
Yeah.
is it, like 17% more, something like that. But I think that you open the brain up to a new habit and you start to
Mhm.
look for the things that are good. So when you do have bad days, because we all do, that's never
Sure.
going to change. That's a human experience. You at least have something to offset it versus allowing it to consume, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I feel that people look at the end result, the big win at the end.
Hmm.
But you got to enjoy the journey that's getting you there, right? If you like, I was listening to somebody talk the other day, and they were trying to write a book, and all they want to do is write this book, and so they were focused on that as their goal. When they refocused their mind and said, it's taking me forever, but if they refocused and said, you know what, I got a couple pages done tonight that I didn't think I was going to do, that's a small win, right? And then all of a
Absolutely.
sudden they look and they're like, wow, I've gotten a few chapters done. Like you have to enjoy the journey and
Yeah.
not always be looking at the end result because that could take years. It's going to take years to write and publish a book. It could, I guess. I have never written one, so I don't know. But from what I hear, it could take years. So if you're waiting for years to celebrate, you're going to be waiting there and it's just going to be, not a pleasant situation. Whereas if you celebrate those small little, I've written a couple pages, those small wins keep you going every day. So you need to enjoy the
Hmm.
journey. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've definitely learned to enjoy the journey. So, well, I'm super excited for you for being here today, Kelly. Thank you so
Uh,
much. And
you.
I am really excited to share with you guys this worksheet. So don't worry, we'll have all that information in the show notes. But I mean, tell everybody, Kelly, how can they find you? How can they follow you? How can they be in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, probably easiest is my website, and it's purposefulpivot.net. Or if they want to email me, it's kellyg@purposefulpivot.net. And I am on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, so you can find me on either one of those platforms. I'm there all the time. So, yeah, would love to chat with anyone and just, have that conversation. Like I said, it's easier to talk to some people when you really want to make some difference in your life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh, I'm so excited. And don't worry, we'll have all that information in the show notes. So make it super easy for you to find Kelly, follow her, be in her world, get a part of her worksheet, and, reach out and have somebody to talk to in a non-judgmental space that really just wants to see you win in whatever capacity that means for you. So, Kelly, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. Do you have anything you'd like to leave everyone with? Any last words?
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, my parting words are just dream big, work the small wins, enjoy the journey. Easy as
Mm,
that.
so easy. Oh, I love it. I love it that we get to make life easy. It really is. It really is a lot easier than we seem to think it is. We have hard moments, But when you learn to shift, it really is amazing. So thank you so much, Kellie. To everybody else that's out there, I hope that, oh my goodness, I hope you got some amazing takeaways and that this is going to be a part of your journey and what you were thinking about as you move into 2026. I know that we're all looking for ways to improve or to grow or to do different. And I do think, like Kellie said, that it comes back to your mindset. It comes back to your own identity. It comes back to your purpose or your mission or what lights you up. Even if that isn't something that you are getting paid to do full time, making the space for something that is important to you, which creates a space for fulfillment in your life, right? And that's all that it takes, a little bit of a shift, and then you can see where the journey takes you from there. So until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable